Recording in progress.
Oh,
Mary, you can go ahead and start.
I'm sorry. I thought maybe I was waiting for something to start scrolling down the screen like for a city council meeting. All right, I'm going to call this meeting of the Council Budget and Finance Committee to order. And let the record reflect that all of the members of the committee, Council Member Wahab, Council Member Lamnon, and myself are all here. And so we will move on to public comments. Are there any members of the public attending or anyone from the committee or anywhere else who would like to make a public comment right now? I don't see any hands raised. So I think we can move on to approval of the minutes. We have two sets. The first is for January 20th.
Do you want me to make a motion?
Oh, well, actually, I was going to ask if there are any comments on the minutes, or that if someone would like to make a motion, but I have a comment. But do you want to go ahead and make the motion?
Do you mind if I move both meeting items?
No, go ahead and move both of them. Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
I will move both meeting items, January 20th and January 25th.
Would you like to second, Councilmember Lamnon?
Second.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Just checking.
Okay. All right. So it's been moved by Councilmember Wahab, seconded by Councilmember Lamnon. I just wanted to comment that the minutes in reviewing them, I was recalling the discussion that we had last time about the employee loan program, which I do hope we are going to look at, starting up. But it led to my talking about how I could envision something like this being done at a regional level, to not only, to help people live closer to where they work, which is what Plan Bay Area 2050 that MTC and ABAG right now are in the stages of developing. That's a goal they want to achieve. It also very much helps fit, and I think it could be used to help fit an equity or goals under the desire to achieve better equity by providing loans to people who may not have had the chance to have them before. And I wanted to report that I did bring this up at the MTC, at the ABAG, the last ABAG executive board meeting, where we approved the final blueprint for Plan Bay Area 2050, which contains all the goals and the strategies. And there is a strategy that alludes to this very concept in that in the final blueprint. I haven't called it up right now, so I can't quote you, but there is a strategy. And I know Councilmember Wahab, you said you were particularly interested in this topic. So I just wanted to let you know I had sort of pushed it along a little by bringing it up at MTC, or not MTC, but ABAG. And it is in this final blueprint. I'm going to probably keep pushing that and seeing whether that can be developed into some regional approach. There are a lot of ways it could be used. This isn't really the time to talk about it more, but I just wanted to report on that since, I know you had, we had talked about it last time and it wasn't included in the minutes. So
yeah, and
with that,
I really appreciate your leadership on that, Mayor. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you want us to include those comments in today's minutes?
Just that maybe
update.
under minutes you can just, yes, that I reported back that a strategy for providing loans for people to live closer to where they work is maybe part of Plan Bay Area 2050 or something like that. With that, unless anybody objects, either of you, the minutes are, both those meetings are approved, and we can move on to our FY 2021 mid-year budget review.
Great.
Director Clausen.
Thank you. And I've got a PowerPoint that we can go through. I will do my best to share it here. And now I'm trying to hang on one second. There we go. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Great. All right, so we are going to go through the mid-year budget proposal that we'll be bringing back to council, and also an update to the general fund long-range model that I know council's eagerly been awaiting, and we have been cautiously avoiding, I'll say, because we wanted to get a better idea of what revenues might look like moving forward, and some more information, so that we could, sort of avoid an anomaly, having a great influence on our on the city's projections. And at this point, we are very hopeful that it is an anomaly and that we can move forward, and that we've got a decent recovery in place. One that I certainly was not as hopeful for in certainly the summer and definitely the fall, but I'm very glad to be back reporting that we seem to be, not the growth that we've seen over previous fiscal years, but working, to maintain the economy, which is fantastic news. So what we've got here is a slide that shows the specific asks that will be included in the mid-year budget update. It's really sort of not all that interesting, because most of what we see here, the $4.5 million number up top, that's labeled previous council approved appropriation subtotal. Those are items that have already come to council for approval, and really it's sort of a formality that we'll be including it in the document, and doing it all in one place, even though council has already authorized those appropriations. So the net that we'll be bringing to council is actually a reduction in expenses over what was adopted by 31,000. There's some ins and outs to that that I will get into a little bit more on the next slide. The other item that wasn't shown on the slide above is an update to some revenue sources. Property taxes, we will be bringing up during this process, as well as sales tax. Very encouraged by the numbers that we're seeing coming out of sales tax. We've talked about it a few times here and a couple times at council. A lot of that is due to all of the online transactions that we're seeing through Amazon and other retailers that are originating within the city, and bringing in sales tax dollars, even though unfortunately they're not hitting our local retailers like we would like them to. Utility users tax is down about $1 million. Real property transfer tax is, I won't say up over previous years, but it's up over our original projections. We're bringing down transient occupancy tax, which is not all that surprising, unfortunately. And cannabis tax, happy to report, and we'll get into this later on the next item, but we are increasing the projected revenues for this fiscal year by $400,000 over what we previously adopted. On the intergovernmental revenue, the large chunks of that, there's two of them. One was the nearly 2 million, 1.979 million in CARES Act funding, and then $1.5 million on an MOU between the county and the city, reimbursing the city for testing costs from March of 2020 through June of 2020. I'll say the biggest expenditure change of note, other than the $4,585,000 that council's already previously approved, is a reduction to the, I don't know, I will remind you, although you may remember, when we adopted the budget back in June, council directed staff to put in an additional $1 million in community agency funding, although wanted to come back during the mid-year process before actually programming those funds. We're comfortable taking it out at this point because we've had a lot more than anticipated in grant funding that's come in to sort of meet those needs that we anticipated. Not that there isn't always more that can be done, but given the city's financial position and sort of what's gone on with the grants, we thought it prudent to propose to reduce that appropriation at mid-year. The rest of it.
Which item is this? Sorry, I didn't hear which particular item.
So it's the contingency funds return to fund balance, this $1 million item in the middle of the screen.
Usually it's red, so thank you. I was looking for it.
Sorry. And so that's really kind of the majority. There's $450,000 in consulting services, which is for development services and plan check fees. These are, a direct recovery. We don't spend the dollars unless the funds come in the door. These are for outside plan checks for various projects throughout the city. The others are, I will not go into detail here, but simply say there are a number of asks in the area of human resources. This is not surprising, I'm sure, to you all. An area that has been impacted by COVID-19 quite a bit. The efforts that have gone on there for our organization, the items that we certainly didn't plan for, like contact tracing and additional benefits that have been required for folks. We've gone back and done a lot in the areas of, say, public works and fire. And maintenance services, but we hadn't really come back and asked for more in the area of human resources. We're doing that here, and probably not surprising to you all, but that's really the largest of the asks. Obviously, I'm happy to answer questions as we go or at the end. I guess in the big picture, we are reducing the use of fund balance. With the combination of the increase in revenues and the reduction in expenses, the increase in revenues and also an offset in expenditures, but not equal to the revenues. We are reducing the use of reserves in the general fund, projecting a use of $2 million less than we had projected when we adopted the budget, which, given all that's gone on, that is absolutely fantastic news. I certainly didn't necessarily expect to be having this conversation, as recent as last fall. So I'm very glad that we're having it. This is a look. I'm sure you all recognize this slide. This is a look at general fund reserves, sort of over time. The yellow there is what we sort of strive for, with the upward line, the solid red line, being 20% reserves, the middle sort of dashed line being 10% reserves, and that's really kind of the I don't know if sweet spot's the right word, but that's really the target that we want to stay in between to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible. Certainly we will remain there this fiscal year and are projecting to do so next fiscal year. But we've got some work to do in the out years. A lot of that has to do with increases in costs associated with unfunded liabilities. I've said it till I'm blue in the face, so I won't beat a dead horse, but we all know that we will do far more than stand by on the sidelines and watch this happen. We will adjust the budget as necessary, and this is simply a projection. But if we were to stand idly by and do nothing, this is sort of the path that we're on, if you will. This provides a bit more detail on on those, sort of the path, if you will, showing our revenues and expenditures, and then the changes over over the fiscal years ahead. Obviously, this year we're looking at a use of $1.2 million, which, looking back when we adopted with the use of over 3 million, this is a great news. We certainly hope that we won't actually utilize those funds, but if we were to spend out as budgeted and revenues came in as budgeted, we'd use 1.2 million in reserves and fall below the council target and policy number of 20% of general fund expenditures. The big change, I'll say, for next year and out years, really in expenditures, has a lot to do with fully funding the OPEB ARC. And so that's the main difference. There's other differences. There's contractually obligated COLAs. There are anticipated increases to expenditures that we can't necessarily control the market on. I won't say that we can't control, but we certainly can't dictate what vendors are going to charge us for things. And so those are really kind of the biggest items and changes that we can get into on a more granular level, should you all want to. I think included in the packet for tonight's meeting was the more detailed model that we can pull up. Certainly if council wants to go into that, or sorry, the committee wants to go into that tonight. But that gives a better idea as to sort of which line items are most impacted in the expenditure areas. So this is a slide of all of the funds not named the general fund, and there are some additional expenditures that are being requested. A lot of what is shown up above, again, are items that council's already approved the appropriations for. The majority of those are grant funding that have come in over the course of this fiscal year. There are some other changes, more minor, down below. The two large changes down below, one is a reallocation of some Measure BB funds going from the operating fund to the capital fund to fund a project. And then also the $4.7 million number is a correction from the previous year that it had been put into the incorrect fund. So it's the funds are sitting in the wrong spot. We're correcting it and putting it in the right spot so that it can fund the expense that it was intended to. This is a overview of what we'll be bringing forward in the capital improvement in the area of capital improvement projects at mid-year. Again, up above what's been approved previously. The big one there is the Headworks Screens project, which is out, I believe, at the water control facility plant. And then we've got also, this is the offset, the $2.7 million down below is the offset to the one that I mentioned earlier with the transfer out of the operating fund into the capital improvement, the capital fund. I think that's really all I've got for you as far as slides go, but certainly happy to answer any questions. I can leave my screen up or stop sharing so that we can see each other and have the conversation and get into anything that you guys would like to get into.
Okay, who wants to get into it first? Unless I'm not seeing raised hand. Oh, yes, I am. And it is Councilmember Lamnon.
Sure, I'll kick it off. Thank you. Congratulations on the things we had control over, and really well done, keeping the belt tightened, the shoestrings tight, whatever the right analogy is for the costs we could control and the revenues we could recoup. And I know some of this is out of our control, but still grateful that we are where we are. And I know that's not a passive thing. So thank you for that work. A couple questions. We talked about briefly last time the decline in the UUT. And I know we talked a little bit about it at the council as well. Do you have any more insights about why that's so down?
No, I mean, the information that I got back from our consultant was, about as detailed as I was able to offer. The last couple of times that we've spoken, it's happening sort of across the state and area for those cities that have a UUT or agencies that have a UUT. There just is not the same level of use as there has been. And the biggest area that we can sort of point to are the commercial users, because we all know folks are home more, probably got their lights on more than they did when they were spending time at work. It's just, those are, say 50 lights versus the 200 that we're lighting an entire floor in a building or, warehouse, et cetera.
Yeah, I keep thinking that, as I think the mayor said last time, that the internet traffic is up, and but as you're saying, it's not offsetting the uses that we saw before. So okay, thank you for that. And then we had talked about if there was any way to pay more of the ARC than I know we paid the PAYGO. So can you give us a little bit of an update? Please remind me.
Yeah, sure. So we did.
Paid and what the thinking is there.
Yeah, we paid the PAYGO, and we also contributed $1 million towards the ARC this fiscal year. It's certainly something that we could, discuss here tonight, as well as at council when we bring it back for mid-year. What that would mean is an additional use of reserves. It's a prudent use, so you're not going to see me kicking and screaming, but certainly as we are in a recession and we've got we are looking to come to agreements with some of our labor groups, and there's so many factors. It's tough to aside from for this prudent use to really sort of advocate for the use of additional reserves.
That's well said. I guess
We
this
had-
comes to council, right?
We had wanted 3 million this year, and we ended up doing 1 million. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Correct. When we adopted the budget, we adopted with the PAYGO plus $1 million in contribution towards the ARC.
Yeah, and we, as the mayor said, had planned to do more, except for the economy. So this item comes to council, right?
Correct.
Am I remembering right?
Yep.
So is it possible to have a sense of, for instance, maybe it's the 1 million contingency that we had set aside that's going back to the city manager's office, or just a $1 million number, if we were to do that, what are the pros and cons so that council can take that up?
Sure.
If my colleagues on this committee are okay with that. I'm not making a decision on it right now or asking for a decision. I'm just asking that when we come forward with it, if we can look at that.
Mm-hmm.
If my colleagues on the committee are okay with that. And so I'll let people talk. Second, my last one was on the capital improvement. Is there any adjustment needed regarding the respiratory equipment for the fire department?
I don't think so. And the reason being is I think they've sort of adjusted things in other areas. I think next cycle. So when we're bringing the CIP plan for fiscal year 2022, that's where you'll sort of see that adjustment taking place. And so we didn't need action at this point, but we will, among other things, we'll need action for the CIP plan. But that will be included in the next process.
Thank you.
Sorry, what was that you were asking about?
So we just recently approved respirator the breathing, self-contained breathing apparatus for the fire department.
Okay.
And I hadn't seen it on the list and just was kind of orienting myself about where it fit in our flow. So thank you, Dustin.
Okay, thanks. Anything else? Okay, Aisha?
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you for, I actually really appreciated this particular staff report. I know I asked for a little bit more pages and a little bit more just sentences to explain what's going on. So I really do appreciate that. I just pulled up the Hayward model, the PDF, the longer range model, if you will, and our total revenues proposed is roughly 172 million, and our total expenses 174 million. So this brings me to my question every time: is we are spending more than we are receiving. I know this is very basic. We do this every year, and this is my biggest concern of city spending habits. Just because I think anybody that understands budget or tries to do budget is that you spend less than what you receive, or at least equal to zero each other out. Do you identify anything? And the number is not significant. It's about $1.2 million. It's significant, but in regards to the amount of money we're talking about, it's insignificant. Is there a potential area that you see that we can kind of just even out?
So I guess, I'll before I answer your question, I'll make one statement. So we, aside from last year, we budget to spend more than we bring in revenues. That's not always how we end up. And why I say prior to last year, we hadn't done that for many years. And you don't have, there's no bigger or less of a fan of doing that than your finance director. But there is no, to answer your question directly, there isn't one specific area that I think that we can just sort of say, all right, we're not going to do this this fiscal year. I think we did a pretty darn good job of that in putting together the proposal that we're bringing forward this time. There are some things that are likely to happen, maybe not this fiscal year, but that will happen in future fiscal years. One of our large expenditures that was up on the first slide that we went into was the cost for the demolition of the Holiday Bowl site. Eventually, we're going to get those funds back one way or another. But it's not really all that much of an option for us at this point to say, hey, we don't want to do that right now. And so I'll say, we're a service organization. Our largest expenses are people. There's no two ways about that. And so reducing the other sort of line items, if you will, would be difficult to achieve that, $1.2 million reduction that would be necessary to balance the budget. I don't expect that this year will be different than others in that we will not spend everything that's budgeted. It's sort of our pattern each year. My hope is that, we whether it be through salary savings, through, not spending on all of the contracts that we have, those sorts of things, that we will finish the year, at or above zero, I guess is the right way to put it.
Okay.
And Dustin, maybe just if you could just share just kind of a rough estimate, what percentage of our general fund budget is salary and benefits? I think, was it like around 85%?
Yeah, it's between 80 and 85%, kind of depending on the year, really, and the need for overtime, the need for whether it be mutual aid or different types of assistance that we have to offer that similar to the Holiday Bowl expense. We'll get those funds back. It just may not be this fiscal year.
Okay. And then the mutual aid, is it dollar for dollar?
Generally, it is actually more than dollar for dollar. It kind of depends on who we're providing mutual aid for and what we're doing. But a lot of the work that we do at the county and state level, it's it is about $1.20 per dollar.
Okay, and that's what I wanted to highlight. In my research around mutual aid, it has been more than $1, and I do want to highlight that. I understand what you're saying, and obviously you guys all know I'm a big supporter of workers getting their salaries and their benefits and so forth, and I try to honor that as much as possible. The next question I do have though is, have we done any true analysis on overtime versus staffing level analysis? Now, I have asked about the staffing level analysis across the city, and obviously overtime is a time and a half for all our employees. Have we seen any type of numbers or data that says that, okay, this is the overtime that we've been showing for the last year or two. This is our staff. We need maybe 5 more people, 3 more people, 10 more people to ensure that we don't necessarily need overtime. And we're also not, and my big concern is that we're burning out people as well, especially those that are working on the front line, whether it's the communications folks, fire, police, maintenance even. We know we're deeply understaffed, but also we're working the same people for far more hours. Have we done any analysis around that?
So
I think, can I talk, Dustin, maybe just a couple of years ago, we actually did that analysis for the fire department and added, I think it was 9 permanent positions. I think it was 3 or 4 years, maybe 2 years ago now. And so we did actually look at that analysis and determined that by adding the permanent positions, it actually saved money and also sort of employee stress and overworking and things. Challenge in, say, like the police department is the overtime results because we have vacancies we can't fill. So even if we added more positions, it's not going to help with the overtime problem because we can't fill the positions we have. I mean, I think on a regular basis, it's anywhere from 10 to 20 vacancies sort of consistently. I think right now we're probably even above that. So.
And I appreciate that. And I just want to know from the fire experience and example that you gave, did we see a decline in the amount of revenue that we have to basically expend?
You mean a decline in overtime?
A decline in overtime and overall cost around that, because time and a half is like, 1.5, right? Versus
asking, did it save us money to hire the people on, which I think you're saying you did an analysis and decided that it would, but yeah, did it?
It did, right? The 9 additional bodies helped cost-wise, correct?
I mean, I'd have to go back and double check. I don't know that, I haven't seen the final sort of analysis of it. And I think one of the other issues that we faced was there were some pending retirements. So we did an overhire because we were going to have the training center closed for 2 or 3 years. So they weren't going to be able to actually do a recruit academy and hire new bodies into the fire department. So we can definitely bring that back to the committee to review and take a look at. But my assumption is, yes, it did save overtime costs and did ultimately save money.
Okay. And the reason why I bring that up is because, and I know we have obviously an issue with our police department in the sense that we can't hire as many people as is needed to fulfill some of the tasks that we need them to fulfill. But in regards to clerical maintenance, things like that, I just want to see if we haven't done an analysis in the last 2 years, maybe we need to. The city has grown in population. I've mentioned this in the last council meeting as well. And we just have to be able to provide the services for residents, but then also if we are overworking staff, and again, paying more for the same work that could potentially be done and we can save some money. I just want some analysis, cost benefit analysis done on this.
Definitely take it. I think, we could always, I think every staff person in the city would say, yes, we could absolutely use more bodies. It's whether, and we could provide better services, faster services, whatever.
I want the math done, not just the input, because I know all of us would love an additional colleague or coworker.
We can't necessarily afford it. So, but I duly noted, and I think there's some opportunity in the next couple of years to do some of those more operational assessments and to really take a look at that. So I appreciate those comments.
Definitely. And obviously I'm not trying to rush you guys. I just think that it needs to be done so we can actually make a decision appropriately, especially before the next, budget meeting that the entire council has to decide, because that's, how we move forward. And we're already mid-February, so I just want to highlight that. To the user utility tax, I do want to highlight that I know Councilmember Lamberton has asked in the past, kind of why is this down? I'm not going to say that this is fact, but I've also just, done some digging, and it's because the larger, let's say, buildings that use a lot of, energy, if you will, has also told people to work from home and so forth. So it's not the same level of usage as it was. And maybe that's a reason. I don't know if it's legitimate, but just sharing that. And then I know in the PAYGO/ARC overall, we paid about 4 million plus, correct?
For the PAYGO plus the ARC?
Yeah. Like,
Right.
what was the total?
Yeah, I think it was about
Around
4.3,
yeah.
give or take.
Yeah. Okay. And then my final comment is that, so I am genuinely always concerned with the reserves. And the reason why I say that is because, as you guys have seen, some of the environmental, I'm going to say, disasters that are hitting our nation, plus COVID that was unexpected, plus so much more. I am always concerned if we're under that 20% mark. Obviously, I've had the conversations with our city manager if that even can be increased, or what is the appropriate rate. Usually they say about 6 months of service that should be provided based on your, I'm going to call it a savings. So I don't know if we need to do a reanalysis of what that percentage really should be, but whatever our 6 month rates are, I think this covers about 3 months. I don't think that 3 months is enough. Obviously, you guys saw from March to June, we didn't even know what was going on with COVID, let alone if there's another disaster or some catastrophe and some, God forbid. The other thing is the fact that 5 million is significant. And as the years go forward, as you see Director Clausen, you highlight that it's just going negative and negative and negative. So I am concerned with that. That is going to be a priority concern for me, and whatever we can do to kind of increase that. There's a lot of projects that I'd like to do just to kind of take the stand that, we're going to definitely work on this and try to spend appropriately. And as many services as we provided, I would like a hierarchy of what we believe is a service that is deemed as a requirement, deemed as critical, and obviously put a hierarchy as what we truly need. And I think to our city manager, that's probably more in your ballpark as to what we legally 100% are supposed to require for the city services. Number two, what is critical for residents and so forth. And number three, what's the responsible thing to do and so forth. So almost like a RACI, but based on services, right? So I'm sure, you can have fun with that. But if we can see a little bit more of that done as well, I think that'd be very influential in any future decision making. So just want to highlight that. Thank you, Mayor. I know I took some time.
No, that's okay. A lot of food for thought. And I mean, start talking about what services you want to take away from that we have been providing to our residents for a long time. And then you're getting into some, because obviously the first thing that comes to everyone's mind is the library. And yet in our community, the library, that is a very, very valuable resource and service to the people who live here. And so I
mention the library, but I would like to see where it stacks up.
Yeah, appreciate your wanting to look at it, and we should evaluate everything. But I think overall, and let me tell you, those gaps out going forward. I have been looking at these charts for almost 20 years now, and we were going to be deeply, deeply in the hole by this time. I would guess, I don't know, I haven't looked at them lately, but I remember seeing the gaps and being scared and thinking, oh my gosh, and we're not there. We still have a fairly healthy reserve. It's not where we want to be. It would have been if it weren't for COVID. We were really on a good track at that point. And we just have to see, this recession isn't going to be like the last one. It's different. You can feel it because, the stock market hasn't crashed. Housing prices are still up. What is going on? We all know that there's a real disparity in who is actually suffering from this, this particular crisis we're in. But, and so all the more reason why we as the city of Hayward need to make sure we're doing everything we can to provide the services that are needed here. But, you know, I always like to look at the bright side. So the bright side is we've looked at these pictures before and they didn't turn out to be nearly as bad, largely, you know, to a great extent because of the work of this city manager, the city manager before her, this finance director particularly. So, you know, I want to thank you for having us have the glass, you know, more like 4/5 full instead of, you know, 1/5 empty. But I had a couple things just, yeah, go back to the community service grant 1 million that it said in the staff report, I believe, that the funding was linked to revenues that fell short. What does that mean exactly? Could you describe again what you meant by that? You know, the $1 million that you're putting back because, you know, we had allocated it, but it wasn't used.
Yeah. So when we you know, came to council to adopt the budget, it was at council's direction that we added an additional $1 million to the community services area, with the commitment not to spend those funds and to bring it back at mid-year to look at actually programming the funds for spending. What I meant to say, and if I said it incorrectly, I'm sorry, is that because we've taken in quite a bit more in grant funding than we anticipated, specifically from CDBG, you know, in the funding that they provided for community grants and for all of the things that we're able to do.
That's what I thought it was, but just the way that was worded, revenues fell short. It's actually revenues came in that we could use for what we were going to use this.
Correct. Yeah.
You know, through the extra allocation. So, okay, I just wanted to clarify that. I have a little question I have to ask. There's an item in there. I think it's police rapid turnaround for, DNA. It says NA testing services. It was DNA testing services. It's the police department thing.
Yeah.
And there's a $60,000, I think, yeah, $60,000 entry because it is no longer covered by the county. What is that about? You know, I mean, do we need to complain to our county supervisor that they're not covering something that they should be? Or add it to the list of things that they are covering.
I will leave that to a policy decision for the council, but certainly, you know, it became an unfunded mandate this year. It's not, it wasn't a decision that was made recently. It was made years ago, that they would no longer be paying for it. And, you know, essentially what that means to communities that are not able to meet the funding is that their DNA tests will sit and, you know, potentially rot over time and crimes won't be solved.
Mayor, it's the rape kit tests. There was a backlog of rape kits. This was a priority for the state and obviously women's activists and so forth. And there was a lot of people that were not getting justice served. So they put the owner on us.
Yeah. All right. I just, yeah, I mean, it just struck me like, okay, the county was paying for it. Now they're not paying for it. You know, what is that about? And okay.
Deeply backlogged.
It's not a big item. So I don't think you know, but still. I just think that I am ever the optimist, but, you know, have you considered at all what is in the current spending packages that, you know, one was passed by Congress earlier, another one pending that will hopefully be put through. I have joined in a letter from mayors all over and elected officials all over the country to support it, and hopefully it will pass. But, you know, have you looked at what might be coming? I think there might be another round of the entitlement funds through the CDBG process that's maybe already been approved, but
I think there's a high likelihood that there will be new funds that come that the city will be eligible for through CDBG. I'm also very hopeful that the city will be eligible for funds that will be available for use in the general fund as well, whether it be in the form of a stimulus I won't say CARES Act because that doesn't exist anymore, but something similar, a similar package that will help agencies to offset either future expenditures or to help to recoup expenditures that were certainly not budgeted for. And I think in many cases, knock on wood, it wasn't in the city of Hayward, but I'm sure there are plenty of agencies that just could not meet the bill and were not able to pay for whether it be services or additional services that the pandemic brought to them. But my hope is that with the change in administration, hopefully there will be a clearer path to local agencies for that funding. As we know, there was a whole bunch of funding that went out and not a lot that came to agencies like ours, unfortunately. It was given to either directly to states or to counties or large cities. And the rest of us were at the mercy of those agencies, if you will.
And yet they couldn't give us the $60,000 that they, no, I'm past that one, but, okay. Well, anyway, I am optimistic that we will see something, or the county will, and perhaps share a little bit of it. But, and I have to say that this is a mid-year look. The mid-year picture is much better than when we set this budget 6 months ago. And, we just keep your fingers crossed. It could get even better. We could actually finish with a little bit more than we expected, rather than a 1.2 million at this point is not all that serious in terms of, if we've gotten this far, the pandemic, the pandemic is better. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say projected using half of our general fund reserve to get us through the end of last fiscal year. So the fact that we're only projecting a use of 1.2 million feels very good in comparison.
It is very good, yeah. And I'm hoping that even that looks better by the end of the year, and it may. If the economy just start coming back, I know people are hungry to go out there and do things that they haven't been able to do during this time. So, and I will say I think our diverse economy, I've always has really helped us get through this, because a lot of cities that I always envied and considered like wealthier than ours because they had great tourist industry, or and historic, or and anyway, they haven't, they have lost a lot from that, from this downturn, whereas our industries, I mean, it's, even in our retail sector, having the 2 Targets and the 2 Costco's has really helped us through, because they were all able to stay open. So we have a lot to be thankful for with this. With that, we will move on to our next item.
Mayor,
Hands up.
I think Councilmember Lemon had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, sorry. I see it's right there. Your hand's up. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to also appreciate our employees. Obviously, that was part of our current position. And then also wanted to ask my colleagues on the committee directly. So any concerns with having our city staff bring back what it would look like if we put another $1 million towards our ARC? Not a decision about that today, just that when this comes to council, could analysis. Any concerns
for the mid-year? That's
mid-year
soon, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think we certainly should have that discussion.
And I just want to be clear, Councilmember Lemon, you want the 1 million to hit our ARC in addition, basically an additional
payment. Yeah, where it was something we said we would think about. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not at all opposed to that. Obviously, I think my main goal is to kind of pay down our unfunded liabilities, right? And hopefully, with the next item, we go a step further and continue to do that. And if I can ask for some analysis, like I would like to see a little bit more analysis also just in the future for the rest of council to look at too, what we can do in regards to economic development, because that is, we lost so many jobs in Mayor. I'm not sure what's the latest number, but obviously it's several thousand upon thousands, right? And what does that look like for the larger economy? And we can't just rely on, a couple of the successful businesses. So it's going to take investment. And, I'd like to see kind of where the city kind of stands on that as well. So I just want to highlight that. And I know I'm working on some projects and hopefully something goes through well. But yeah, no, I'm open to both.
And we can look at the economic development piece. I know we do have one position vacancy there right now. So I think just even being able to fill that vacancy would help. We can move some additional initiatives forward. So I think that we can definitely take a look at that and figure out if there's anything else that we can evaluate.
Definitely. And to Director Clausen, my final question is, on page 12 of the CAFR, the CAFR, right? It shows that there's a slight surplus of about $2.1 million in Table 3. Do we have any, do you have any comments about that?
Off the top of my head, I don't even know what you're referring to be totally honest with you.
Okay.
The CAFR would be the comprehensive report
Right.
last year,
Yeah.
and end of fiscal year 20.
Do we have any updates or anything as to where our revenues are in regards to any other updated information on that, or no?
As far as last year's CAFR?
Yeah.
I
2020.
mean, it's all.
Did we end the year with what was the figure you asked about?
It was about 2.1.
And what was
it
categorized as a surplus?
A slight surplus. So I just wanted to see, how it plays into potentially this year, or if not, that's fine too. I just I could do a little more digging and sharing later.
Honestly, off the top of my head, that's a few 100-page document, and I didn't come fully prepared to discuss it tonight. I can certainly take a look. I know that was not the case. That was not specific to the general fund. That doesn't mean that it wasn't an increase to fund balance for the city as a whole, which is fantastic. But off the top of my head, like I said, that's a huge document, and I don't.
No worries. I'll share a little bit more via email, and then hopefully, get a circle back on this. Thank you.
It could be one of the enterprise funds, or with the capital fund, so. Because that really varies, and you can't look at that the same way as you look at a general fund budget. Okay, any other comments, final comments on this item before we move on? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item number, the next item, which is the cannabis revenue unfunded liability referral. And if you don't mind me, I'm just gonna do something for a minute. So why don't Mayor Pro Tem Wahab, especially since this is your referral, why don't you go ahead, and I will be right back.
Definitely. So Director Clausen, I know you guys wrote a staff report. Not sure exactly, what you would like to share.
I have a incredibly brief PowerPoint that we can go over quickly, but it's really a facilitation of a conversation for the committee, and happy to guide it, happy to answer any questions that I can, but really I think it's more of a conversation for you guys to have, and then offer what we can as far as feedback. So I will share my screen momentarily here. All right. Did this to me last time too. I should learn by now.
See it just.
All right. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So we don't need to see the title slide there. So essentially, this is a graphic representation of what we currently have in the as far as the cannabis tax goes, of 7%, 6%. I'm sorry. Currently, 1% of that is going towards the community benefit fund. The remaining 6 has been, essentially, it's a general tax So it's able to be used for whatever direction council sort of chooses for it. The referral has what we've got here is the split of the 6% of an unfunded liability for OPEB of 2% of the 6%. So a third of the remainder, general fund reserves for a third, and council discretion for a third. This next slide is a look at, and this is statewide cannabis sales. So I don't want to confuse council and lead you to believe that this is a projection of what's happening here in our community, but it does provide some trend data that we can sort of look towards, hopefully to glean some information from as we move forward, since we really don't have much information to analyze on our end. To date, the city's received only 2 payments for cannabis tax, and similarly only has 2 businesses that are licensed and operating. That's really kind of all the information that we have to present, but certainly happy to answer any questions that you all might have. Happy to, Councilmember Wahab, I know this is your referral, so I'm, happy to let you explain further. I didn't want to, put any words in your mouth, mix up your words, do anything of that. So certainly happy to kick it over to you.
Definitely. And our mayor is back, so if she wants to ask any questions.
So go ahead. Why don't you go ahead and start this time anyway? And
definitely. I appreciate the staff report. I just FYI, I overthought this. Your breakdown of the 6% and divide was a lot better than my 100%, one third. So I appreciate that. This is very interesting how people work with numbers. I do want to highlight that the staff report kind of talks about the one-time use of funds. This is not that. So I just want to be very clear to the larger public that is interested in this. The one-time fund policy, which this council has and this budget committee worked on, and I think it's a great policy. It's a great, let's say, one of the steps that we definitely need to do, especially if we are selling property or, again, one-time funds. This is ongoing, and to Councilmember Lamnan's point in the last item of trying to pay down our unfunded liabilities, after a lot of discussion with a lot of groups, and just to highlight again to the public, and I know some people have asked me about this, our fire union, our police union, the larger Alameda Labor Council, and some of the unions within that are actually very interested in this, because this could potentially be, let's say, a slight roadmap for other cities to kind of partake in that have approved cannabis. We talk about cannabis on council a lot because it's a lot of heated debate on cannabis and how that works and how we design it for a city. But I want us to focus on what the purpose is. Regardless of the cannabis, retail market and so forth, I want us as a council to kind of prioritize where we spend it, and it has to be very principled. And that's why I think that it should be kind of covered in, again, council discretion, the general fund reserves. There is a slight rule written out that if, we are at that 20%, we can kind of add a little bit more to it, but then also spend on economic development, which, we definitely need in this city. And then obviously unfunded liabilities and OPEB, we have a commitment to our how should I say this, our staff and their retirement plans and so forth. And I definitely wanted the public to know that we have one retail business kind of up and running. And we have a wide variety of different industries within cannabis. So it's not just retail, it's, also cultivation, it's also manufacturing, it's also, a bunch of other things. So this number that we have for 1/4 of $95,000 is set to grow. We are at the infancy stage of cannabis in our city, and I just want us to kind of be very disciplined in how we spend that. And definitely with the public in the conversation, I definitely want the public to know that, if we want to ensure that we have maintenance, street, PD, fire, even library, this is a way to kind of free up some of our additional funds that if we don't have to necessarily constantly pay into our unfunded liabilities, or we can reduce that by a certain level, we can direct funds elsewhere. And that's kind of the goal I have. If we can kind of get our debt a little bit lower, we can focus the rest of the revenue somewhere else, in areas that, as we talked about, is a priority to residents. So that's kind of what I have in mind for this. Obviously, it takes a lot of staff input, and obviously my council colleagues here, as to exactly what we want to do. But I think this is a good first step, and I would love it if my colleagues here will partner with me on this. I know it's of interest to a wide variety of people. Mayor, you are muted.
Because my phone was ringing. You can't stop that from happening. Okay, so yeah, I think we do. Councilmember Lamnon have comments?
Sure. So I am 100% there on the idea of paying down our unfunded liability. Of course I am. I won't belabor how that's true. We just know that it is. I 100% agree with that. I also agree that the growing unfunded liability is a huge is a huge driver in that that gap that we saw, and that the mayor referenced earlier, that we continue to see every couple of years we're going to fall off the cliff. The way to fix that is really getting our unfunded liabilities under control. That's not news, but I agree with you 100% that that is what we got to do if we want to do anything else. No argument. Knowing that, we passed a cannabis tax a couple of years ago. That was the point. We already saw this mandate, this need, and we passed the tax. So having a policy or requiring staff to track that revenue separate from something else feels like an exercise that is frankly unnecessary. Now, if we want to have a policy that says every year we will pay our full ARC in writing, I mean, we've had a verbal policy about that, but if we want to make it a written policy so that we are more held to it, we are more, you used a good word, Councilmember Hub, and I've lost it at the moment, disciplined. If we want to be more disciplined, I'm all for that. If we wanted to look at, do we hold our reserves at the 15%? And Mayor Pro Tem Wahab, you made a good point earlier about the need to have a robust reserve. And given the crisis, there's been some leeway to have it be at 15%. If we wanted to go 15% for maybe 5 years and dedicate any delta to that, to the unfunded, that I can also support. But I don't see the need to do what we've already done by reallocating the cannabis money. The whole point is that it needs to pair. And even at that, we're not quite meeting our expenses yet. So thank you.
All right, thank you. And I think that the reason we're not is really this year meeting our expenses is because of COVID. It does look like this revenue is starting to come in. It took a while. I went back and looked at this in light of what we said when we got the tax passed. And, I do think, Measure EE, it said to assure local control. That was that was like a primary thing that we didn't want. We wanted to have our own tax, our own policy to avoid the state telling us later what we could or couldn't do, as I recall. And so to assure local control and close ongoing deficits, shall the city of Hayward be authorized to have this tax? And, ongoing deficits, we do, of course, in the ballot argument mention flexibility to ensure that the city has the financial, and this is something you have to consider, is that at least a part of this tax has to be used to assure that the city has the financial resources to manage cannabis related issues when and if the community chooses to allow processing or sales of adult use cannabis. So, and then later on, it is essential that we be able to generate necessary revenue to support effective control, education, and enforcement policies and procedures to assure the safety of our community. So we made those promises in the ballot initiative, some of which I think, the deficit to close ongoing deficits, what you're proposing does maybe fit into that. But I just have to point out that, I mean, one of the things is our cannabis program is not cost free, and we haven't, we need to do the enforcement and, just even setting up. I mean, I think we're probably in the hole so far, but we'll start to make that up again. I hope. It would be interesting to look at that. What have our costs been so far, and what are our expected ongoing costs? So you got to take that out of it, because if you're going to make a policy around just cannabis tax, I have to say, and I think it's certainly well-intentioned, and I think both Councilmember Lamnon and I agree with the importance of, trying to pay down our debt, but to handcuff the council with a policy that doesn't allow us, this year, the reason we're not doing it is because of a worldwide pandemic. Who could have predicted that? We were on a really good path. But you never know. That's just it. You never know. I always thought the big one would be an earth-shaking thing, but it didn't turn out that way, or at least not yet. Knocking on wood there. And so I think that we can't, we need to watch. I think it should be. We will see it as cannabis tax revenue on our on our financial sheets, and we'll know how much we're getting. And certainly each year as we're doing the budget, we can have a policy. I'm all for putting some of this toward paying down those debts. I hope that we can do it. This year, and we're going to have a discussion. We've gotten, what was the number again? About $500,000. Is that what we're expecting over
Roughly
year? Yeah. So, I mean, Councilmember Lamnon just said she wants to try to, put an extra $1 million into the fund this year. And I we have to talk among the whole council about that. And it's a good suggestion. Whether we really can do it or not, I think we have to discuss. But the basic, your basic intent here is a good one. I just don't think that it needs to be in the form of this kind of a more rigid policy that requires. Now, we did it with Measure C to some extent, but that was a little bit different because that a lot of that was capital.
And Mayor, I definitely want you guys' input. So just to clarify, we are a policy-making body, and obviously when this came back to us, the goal is for you guys to have your input. And if there is a certain piece that you guys would like to remove, whether it's 2% here or make this a 50-50. But the reason why I said that this, and I just want to clarify, the reserve comments that I had was that I do believe our reserves are still too low. I would like, again, to cover at least 6 months. We're covering about 3 months. So I want to highlight that. And then when we make policy, again, we can adjust things, we can adjust the percentage, we can adjust the kind of direction. And I do want you guys' input. And that's why I want this partnership here on particularly this item. Even though we say that, our cannabis, it's specifically used for X, Y, or Z, these are general fund dollars, and we are able to redirect it however we want. The reason why I want to prioritize what I listed, and again, I'm happy to slightly adjust things, is we don't have basic policies in place. And it's a disservice, especially considering that we have potential future problems coming up. And Mayor, I agree with you. I think I personally thought it was going to be an earthquake situation too. And obviously COVID happened out of the blue. So the main goal is to make sure that we are relatively safe and healthy fiscally. And that is our responsibility, not only for the subcommittee, but the larger council as a whole. Again, I'm happy to change certain specifics on this particular policy, but We don't even have a basic policy of we
have a
won't spend.
I would argue we do have that policy now. We have a policy to have our reserve fund at a certain level. I mean, you may want to
True. I'm not talking about the reserve
that
at this
right
point.
now, but we have that policy. And then we also have a policy on spending, we have a policy to pay our ARC every year. I mean, maybe we could make it a little more strict, but
and that's the thing, Mayor. We
wanted to pay this, and of course, this year, because of the uncertainty around what was happening, we have budgeted, but we may get to at least 2/3 of what we intended. And
Mayor, we have an
one-time funds that this is very similar to, but you're wanting to separate out one particular revenue source and apply that policy that we have to one-time funds in general to that one particular revenue source. And I just don't see that really does anything for us. I don't think that's going to get us where we want to go. And I don't think it's, I think it's not even quite ripe yet to even look at what we're going to be getting, because we know we need a few years of experience of seeing what this means to our budget. But I would say that we certainly have to keep in mind that this was passed by voters with the understanding that it was certainly going to be used to do the enforcement and the regulation that we're doing around this issue, and that otherwise, we said something about closing. It was very interesting, closing ongoing deficits. So I think that is a use. I just think that this is not right. This is not ready for us to make. And I'm not sure I go along with making really strict set asides. We did it with Measure C, and we have to look at that every year and separate it out. But I don't want that to be a trend. I don't think that's a healthy way to do budgeting.
Mayor, and I understand and I respect that, and I see how we always have to look at Measure C. My goal again is leaving it up to staff as to how it is spent. But even if we were to make this a 50-50 policy, we truly have an opportunity here to prioritize where we spend. And I know that we have said verbally many times that we are going to try to pay down our ARC and our unfunded liabilities. I think the reason why this is important to just highlight is because we have an opportunity here, not only to potentially take, whether it's the reserves or whether it's just strictly economic development, we have not prioritized these areas of need that we see and consistently talk about as we're struggling to figure out where can we do this or do that. Just when we talk about just family lives and so forth, we on a personal budget have to prioritize where we are spending. So if we know that our house and the debt that we have to pay for our home, which is, let's say, our unfunded liability, that is a priority before we pay for, let's say, a cell phone bill, right? That is the kind of concept that I would like to put here. And again, we do not have the policy in place where we are stating to which we are, again, policymakers. This is kind of what we're supposed to be doing, is we don't have a policy that says that we are going to spend within the amount that we create as revenue. So I just want us to be a little bit more disciplined. People
policy, Aisha, we do have that policy.
Director Clausen, do we have that policy?
Try to do a balanced budget every year.
Do we have a specific policy that says that we will not spend more than we make?
It says that we will adopt a balanced budget.
Yes.
Yeah, but that is not what I'm talking about. We spend each year, Mayor, each year we spend out of the reserves every single year for the most part.
I mean, when you look
at that is balancing. That is not saving. This is my concern. We are not saving.
Can I just jump in? The state constitution actually requires that we have a balanced budget. So I believe that's where the policy is. So I don't think that's actually something that we set locally.
So and thank you to our city manager for that. Again, a balanced budget basically means we have been taking from our reserves, our safety net. And my goal is to just ensure that our safety net is decent just in case another thing happens. So the way we have been balancing our budget year over year over year is by taking a little bit from our reserve. And as you guys saw on the long fiscal, guideline, if you will, we keep taking from the reserves, $1 million here, $2 million here. This year, we're projected to take another 1.2 million. take a
But
look.
that may not happen. This is a mid-year projection, and often the figures do come out better. They've already come out better. So I don't know. I mean, I think, didn't we have, like, in last year or the year before, we had a small surplus, I believe.
Not this past year. The year prior to that, we had it. And again, it was because we passed a tax measure. But I'm saying that the trend has not been where we're lucky. I'm not trying to talk about luck, right? I'm talking about, let's be disciplined.
Well,
this is a
this
decision.
policy isn't going to do that. It isn't.
What
going
do you
to do
believe?
that
What do you
because
believe?
You don't even know what the revenue is from the source.
It's projected revenues. Everything we do is projections, right? So the user,
Yes, well, and so
UUP,
I think we have the policies to put that money where you're saying we should. I think we look at all of our revenues and then we say, we do want to prioritize building that reserve to 20%, and we want to prioritize, paying our unfunded liability, which we were on track and hopefully we'll be back on. So I just don't think this is a necessary thing. And I think it also, it subjects us. I want to read to you what, we did not have a argument against Measure EE, the cannabis tax, but we had an argument, a rebuttal to an argument in that we wrote in favor of Measure T. That was the real property transfer tax increase. And so this is the rebuttal. The person who wrote the rebuttal, anti-tax, complaining about the tax. All the safeguards and oversight don't change that fact that there's no guarantee this money will be used for city services. In fact, if you vote yes on this tax, most of the money will probably be used to pay for pensions for retired city hall bureaucrats. Now, I don't agree with that statement. That is a rebuttal to a statement that the city, the city actually, sponsored, or people in favor of the ballot measure. And but it is what gets thrown at us if we were to highlight that this is what we're doing with this money, rather than what we talked about in the ballot argument, making sure we are doing the providing the services and regulation and enforcement, and then all the other city services. So I appreciate it. It's a discussion we have every single year around the budget, and there are a lot of things to balance. You just talked about the need for, more firefighters rather than using, now it may save money, but sometimes, I'm not sure that overtime isn't, it does require analysis, but I think we have these policies in place, and I just can't support adding this kind of layer of taking one part of our general fund revenues out and then having to track that in this sort of somewhat complicated, not overly complicated, but somewhat complicated way is, I just think that sets us up when we do have the policies in place. And I know this council is committed to doing these things. And what I think that I will be able to support at the council discussion, adding the extra $1 million to, given how the picture is looking right now, and my optimism about the overall economy coming out of the COVID. At least maybe we could revisit this in a year and really see where we are in terms of those cannabis revenues, because I don't know that we can necessarily count on them.
Mayor, and I appreciate
my view. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you being willing to revisit this. I do want to highlight that I think that I personally would prefer that we at least work this in. And the reason for that, again, is, and to the public's information, we have had roughly 5 measures that all pretty much say the same thing. And I shared this last time. This particular cannabis sales tax can go up to 15%. It is obviously, as you said, to assure local control and close on ongoing deficits. However, we are trying to use it for other things. So one, it says close ongoing deficits. And then another, it says, as you read, could be used for valid municipal purposes, including police, fire services, paramedic services, anti-gang stuff, so much more. I'm not trying to tie the hands of council. I just want us to be a little bit more prudent and fiscally responsible. And I think that's, why I'm here and propose this. I know again, I want input to improve something. I don't necessarily want to kill an idea just because, we're not ready to fully vet it.
So maybe we revisit it next year this time and see where we are and in terms of those revenues. But
is there any way that we can include this in some capacity, whether it's, if the percentage points are the thing that bothers you or the priority? Again, it was like to be an evenly split. We also have council discretion literally written in there, so it does not kill off, our discretion, if you will.
well, then I guess I would just say it is unnecessary and redundant of policies that we already have. And I appreciate your intent. And I think we all will, I think we work together to see that we are being prudent. I do believe we have been, and we'll see how we come out of the pandemic. But right now, yeah, we are doing the responsible thing by providing the services we need to provide to our community. And I'm still hopeful that we won't end the year on a, in a deficit mode. And I think we make the most of the resources that we can get our hands on, like those that come from grants that we've used really well this year. It's a very complicated thing, but I just don't see that this does anything that we don't already have in place. So I don't, okay.
And I will just tell to the bargaining units that we're very much interested in this, in seeing a good faith effort from our city council to prioritize the debt specifically through policy, not just word of mouth. Obviously, I think that they are very much interested. We don't necessarily have the exact same policies. No, we state that we have
the policy of wanting to pay our ARC down, and we haven't ever fallen behind on our overall pension obligations, and we probably won't. Those are priorities. They get
and this was a step to very much move in that direction again. And make it written policy and try to pursue it at least 100%. And like I said, I'm happy to adjust kind of the percentage points. I'm happy to adjust kind of the direction, whether it's economic development, whether it's the reserves, whether it's so much more. To me, I think that if we delay this, it is a missed opportunity. This is just my personal opinion, especially as we ask consistently from our bargaining units to give up, give up, give up. This was definitely an effort to show that we are intentionally trying to invest in this particular piece. And be a little bit more, just like I said, saying that this is a priority. We will designate certain funds to 100% ensure that we are fulfilling our promise to you. I understand all the other efforts that are being made, but I do genuinely believe that this is an idea we have. We are at the seed stage, and before it gets lost in something else, that we can actually focus on what we have consistently said and actually show the action behind it as well. So that is my statement.
You would like to do at this point? Did you want to? I mean, I don't think a motion is going to pass unless.
So I personally, if you or Councilmember Lamnin, even if you guys would like to change the percentage points,
I don't think you're hearing us. I don't think you're hearing what we're trying to say to you. Do you want to try, Councilmember Lamnin?
Sure. So let me be clear. It's not about the percentage points. It's about tying it to cannabis revenue. If you want a policy that says we will fully fund the ARC every year, and we are willing to make the budget trade-offs to do that, that's a policy discussion I'm willing to have and work I'm willing to support. If you want to do, bring down some other cost like the reserves, I mean, I keep bringing that up because it's the only one I know, the only lever that I know of to pull on, but I'm open to, if you want to target a specific expense that gets pulled down so that we can free up revenue to prioritize the ARC, fine. If you want a policy that says we will no longer use reserves to balance the budget, and that we must have a budget that is balanced without the use of reserves, I'll be interested in that. it's the tying it to the cannabis revenue that is frankly redundant. And so changing anything about that is not something I'm open to.
Okay, so to Director Clausen and our city manager, I just want to highlight that I have had conversations, obviously, to make sure that we have a policy that we have a balanced budget without using the reserves. I know that there were pros and cons from our Director Clausen who shared that. I would like him to elaborate a little bit on that, but I'm also willing to say for this particular, cannabis revenue that, again, is projected to be significant to our city. While we are asking for employees to furlough their hours to save $1 million here, $2 million here, again, this would prioritize that and inform that our council is willing to prioritize this revenue and specifically, hopefully, alleviate some of the burden there.
Except that it doesn't. I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt for a second because I just heard you say this, and we did that. We passed the tax. That was the whole point.
Yeah.
So saying it again doesn't make it any more true.
If we didn't have that revenue, our employees would be, we would be a lot worse shape and we'd be asking more sacrifices. But we didn't have that revenue until just very recently. We had not seen anything, and we still really haven't seen anything all that substantial. So let's see. You're talking about less than $100,000 right now. So that's
which is projected to be 400,000, at least $500,000. And again, it's not all our businesses have been up and running. We are revisiting the cannabis ordinance as we speak.
Right. So let's let that happen and see where that goes. Because
and I'm sorry, Mayor.
And
our unfunded liability is 60 million.
Yeah.
And this, again, as I said in the last meeting, drop by drop, a river is formed. So that is my thing. And Director Clausen, if you want to elaborate as to the other aspect of this conversation.
Sure. So, a couple of things. I think that one, I want to be very clear. The global pandemic is what led us to find the need to have discussions with our labor groups about furloughs and come to those agreements. So I absolutely would not say that it was because of poor fiscal management. I do think that we certainly could look at a policy that says that we will not adopt a budget without the use of reserves.
Or with the use of reserves.
With the correct, we will not adopt we will adopt a balanced budget without the use of reserves. That's what I was trying to articulate, but not doing very successfully. Where we get into trouble is a crazy year like last year, where a policy is as strong as what stands behind it. So if we came to a year like last year, we would have likely had to either adjusted policy to allow for us to have adopted a budget in June. We certainly could have done, if we were living by that policy this last June 30th, we would have ended up really most likely having to reduce positions in the city in order to balance that budget. We've done a fantastic job, in my opinion. Clearly, that's open to debate by any number of people in managing expenditures in a way that has stopped us from having to use reserves. I understand and get the principle behind adopting the budget with the use of reserves. But what I'm talking about is the actual management of it, so that we don't actually have to use those reserves by the end of the year. And some of that's through better revenues than anticipated. Some of that's through controlling expenditures throughout the years. All of those things. I think if we were in a pattern where we were consistently using reserves year after year after year, not in the budget sense. I get that, and we should absolutely work to attempt to adopt a budget that is fully balanced without the use of reserves every single year. And trust me, you've got my vote every single year. It's getting there and trying to do things like avoid overtime, and adding more staff is not generally a way to help to reduce the budget. And so but we don't want to have services reduced. And so we've got to try to do this delicate dance and balance things while also trying to meet the obligations long term. And so if we sort of tighten the constraints around it so that we sort of take that management out of our hands, and say you can't adopt unless you've got a fully balanced budget. In years where we have revenues that are cyclical and go up and down, it's really going to restrict our ability to keep staffing levels at a consistent basis. Adding staff, if we're sort of looking at that, will become very, very difficult. We'll end up in a situation where we'll have some, we'll have to look at contracting things out. We'll have to look at a whole number of different solutions, because we have done a pretty darn good job of not having to lay people off, not having to let people go, not having to reduce staff a whole bunch when we go through a downturn, and being able to sort of ride the wave, if you will, through some ups and downs of the economy. So
I think what he's saying is that you pass a budget, but it's a plan, and all good plans have the tendency to go awry a little bit, or not quite. I mean, sometimes it comes out better than you thought. Some more often, unfortunately, maybe worse. But it really is a plan, and it is a good idea to have a plan to not spend reserves, but you never know what's going to happen during that year. And so I think the more we try to pigeonhole things into this category, rather than each year the council has to look at the whole budget. And moreover, no council, including ours, can tie future councils to any of these policies anyway. And it's probably a good thing, because each year we just have to really look at where we are and what we're doing. But I do think we have shown strong commitments to the things that you are trying to promote here. And I'm all for your continuing to champion those things, and we, us continuing to say yes. We need to fund our reduce our long-term liabilities, which actually in turn helps us keep more of the money. I mean, have to spend less on those things. And then in the long run, and then, balancing budget, not using reserves, building reserves is important. We did create a policy around one-time unexpected, revenues, but to start really having all these different funds. I mean, even the Measure C one is kind of difficult to track and keep track of every year. So anyway, it's been a good discussion, and we do appreciate your bringing this to us to talk, but I don't think you have the support of this committee to move it forward to council at this time. But
which I will say is a disappointment. I do want to ask, when we push policy, and you keep referencing that we're tying council's hands, would you like to elaborate a little bit more on that?
You can't, my understanding, because it's come up before over the years, is that you can't, I'm trying to remember what it came up over, and I can't, and I don't even, you might not have even been around but then, Councilmember Lamnan, although, but we were told you can't, any future council can undo. So you can't say, I mean, certainly you can borrow money and promise that you'll pay it back over time, and the council is pretty much bound by that. But a policy like this is not something that each year, when the council looks at the budget, changes are made. And, I think, we've actually, we're not meeting our policies right now, but there are reasons for that. There are reasons having to do with services to our residents, services to our community is the highest goal, and making sure. And so,
and I appreciate that. Do you feel like, so Measure C, and the reason why I want to highlight this, because it's been brought up multiple times, Measure C is transparently letting us know where certain funds are being sent, right? We know clearly, firehouse, we're fixing that, doing that, any type of construction costs, things like that. And that's kind of the benefit of kind of tying certain revenue. And I know I've heard council, not supportive of changing too much. Now, this with Measure EE, the cannabis, was to do that as well, is again, transparent that we are committed to do this and that. It is in the general funds. And we are very much targeting specifically what this entire council wants to prioritize. Go ahead.
I'm going to cut this off because we need to adjourn, but go ahead. Did you have something?
Quickly on this, I just wanted to highlight for Measure C, the council actually, when the council put the measure on the ballot, adopted a resolution that included the split of what the money was going to be spent on. And so that was the sort of commitment of the political promise, but it wasn't actually in the ballot language. So future councils could change that, so it's because it was in a resolution, it gave
which is what I'm asking for here.
And I'm just saying,
Yeah,
yeah, I think that right now there's not support from the committee on, on that. And so, I think it, takes 2 votes to move it out of the committee. So
we're now going to move on to the next item, which lost track of, is the agenda planning calendar for the next few months. But anybody have anything to add? I wanted to, I actually did. I wanted to review the Hayward Community Foundation, or schedule that in at some time.
Sure, we can do that. Would you like we could have the May or the June meeting?
I guess this is the committee to do that in. I can't think of another council committee. But we need to, we have a fund. I want to know how much is in it. I've made contributions, and yet I don't see us doing anything to like control how that money is being used, or, or any report back to council yet on how it has been or how much is in there. And
so I think
that when you contribute to the, to it, you don't really get much back in terms of a thank you from the city of Hayward. I just don't think the foundation is functioning yet. The collection of money part of it is, but so I think we need to talk about that more.
No, that's fine. I want to just be careful about, Mary Thomas has been sort of coordinating that, and she's also very involved in the policy innovation workshops that are coming up over the next couple of months. So we can provide just a high level summary to the council of I think we're probably at about the $100,000 mark right now of funds. And I think there was an intent, this was the initial COVID community relief fund that we set up, not the broader fund. So we did come to the council once for the sort of allocation and distribution of those funds back in, I think it was just, oh gosh, it's been a while. I can't remember when we did that. It was last year sometime. But we can at least provide an informational item updating on how much has been collected, and I can share that feedback. And then I think we can come back, maybe I would suggest June, with a more comprehensive update, just to let the staff go through the policy innovation.
Yeah, I just wanted to get it in there. We don't have anything scheduled for May, so, yeah, sometime. All right, anybody else have a item to offer?
And Mary, your item, the community foundations, I'm sorry, I don't know the title. I always mess up the title.
Community benefit fund. I mean, I think but it.
So there's a lack of transparency as to, how much have we received, how much is going into anything, and basically you'd like to track it.
Well, it's not part of the city budget. It's a charity.
I want to be very, very clear. These are not city funds. This is not run by the council. The city administration is not responsible for it. So
it's the East Bay Community Foundation, actually.
Well,
but
a desire for additional transparency. These are not administered by the finance department. So I just got to be very clear.
No, but it's something we had talked about setting up before, before COVID came along. And then I think, it got a boost because there was a donation, a substantial donation that we knew we could use. So we got it going through the East Bay Community Foundation. I just want to see where it's going, right now.
Yeah, we can bring that back. That's not.
All right. Anybody else have any other suggestions or comments on the suggested topics? Not seeing any hands raised this time. All right. With that, any committee members, staff announcements? Okay. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Recording stopped.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks.